This is Ed Niles, architect from Malibu, and you are listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. In nearly every major city, housing the homeless is a major problem. Since the defunding of residential mental health programs back in the Reagan era, as well as the rising cost of housing and other cutbacks in the welfare safety net, America has created a huge population of people with problems who have nowhere to live except outside. Especially in California, which has the most homeless citizens in America, everyone recognizes the problem, but there's a complete lack of political will or consensus to significantly address it. Even with the best ideas, there always seems to be a generally well-funded, lawyered-up constituency that's going to fight it. Joining us today are the authors of the new book, Housing the Nation, architect Alexander Gorlin and architectural historian Victoria Newhouse, with their take on what to do. Following that, there's some great jazz vocals to enjoy from Nicole Lvoff. And now, here's your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom. We've had a housing problem for decades, and it's not getting any better or easier. We propose new public or affordable housing, but the already housed don't want it near where they live, and they certainly don't want their taxes to pay for it. Architects propose innovative low-cost designs, which is cool, but cities have a myriad of regulations prohibiting public funding of the infrastructures that make these micro-communities more than warehousing for the poor. Things like on-site shops, schools, religious spaces, and nearby places for people to work. The grand experiments of the 1960s in public housing failed because these things were not only absent, they were often prohibited. You were forbidden, by law, from having a grocery store in your housing project. Plus, the federal government only built the structures. They would not provide for the maintenance, a task the cities were not prepared to handle. Thanks to Congress, the U.S. doesn't even fund the construction of public housing anymore. It's all been left to the states. A remarkable, repeating phenomenon that when something important is left to the states, nothing good tends to happen. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by June Goldfinger and Jeff Taylor, sponsors of Circle, Square, Triangle, a traveling exhibition on the architecture of Myron Goldfinger, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
On any given night, about 650,000 people have no place to sleep. And nationally, there is a need for 5 million affordable apartments or houses. Today, we'll talk with the editors of the new book, Housing the Nation, about the affordable housing crisis. One of them is architect Alexander Gorlin, who founded his own firm in 1986. A recipient of the Rome Prize for Architecture, he has been included in Architectural Digest AD 100 Top Architects and Designers for 2 decades. Victoria Newhouse is an architectural historian, Pritzker Prize judge, and founder of the Architectural History Foundation. Welcome, Alex and Victoria.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Victoria, before we talk about your new book, let's talk about an old book. One of your first was on Wallace K. Harrison in 1989. Who was Wallace K. Harrison?
Well, Wallace K. Harrison, at the time that I published that book, was one of the most prominent architects in New York City, partly because he was a close friend of Nelson Rockefeller. Rockefeller liked him and trusted him. He was an old-fashioned gentleman, very, very trustworthy, very honest, very different from the people we see in public life today, I'm sorry to say, and somewhat talented as an architect. I wouldn't put him in the same category as Le Corbusier or Mies van der Rohe, but he was very good, especially at small-scale projects.
What were some of the buildings he was known for?
He was the head architect for the United Nations building.
That's impressive.
He designed the Metropolitan Opera. He designed a number of buildings in Albany. And more importantly, and I think more interesting to me in any case, were his small residential designs. He designed a lovely apartment house on West 84th Street, just opposite the backside of MoMA. And he designed a number of other houses, especially in Maine, where he himself had a house.
Those little apartments behind MoMA, those were the Rockefeller apartments?
That's right.
Right. I've been in some of those. They're gorgeous still today.
They are gorgeous. Yes, they're very nice.
Beautifully appointed. And you've been writing many other books since then.
Yes, I have.
What are some of those?
Well, I went on to write a book about new museums called Towards a New Museum. And then I wrote about how museums work, which is called Art and the Power of Placement. I wrote a book about new concert halls and opera houses. I've always written about cultural institutions, new cultural institutions.
And Alex, you grew up in New York and won the Rome Prize, spent a year in Rome. How did that experience shape you when you opened up your practice?
Well, I had become an Italophile after a year in Rome. And after a very strict modernist education at Cooper Union and Yale at the time, I became enamored of more traditional architecture for my initial career, I would say. My first houses were a series of palazzos.
Okay. So departing from the traditional Yale curriculum.
Yes, that's correct.
Pointing towards Bernini.
Right.
Let's talk about your new book, Housing the Nation. I mean, obviously, affordable housing has been a problem for a long time, and there have been many different proposals to try to fix it. There seems to be a lot of desire to fix it, but also a lot of unwillingness to do anything really about it. So how did the two of you approach putting this book together and asking the people who were involved to participate?
Well, it started from an article that Victoria and I were asked to write for the American Institute of Architects Journal in New York City to discuss affordable housing in New York at the time. It was about 3 years ago. And that analyzed the issues endemic to the city. And we both became very interested in expanding that to a national story. And also I had expanded from my early palazzo career to doing housing that was affordable, that would, social housing that would help more than an individual couple, I'd say.
And Victoria, how about you?
Well, I think Alex has described it very correctly. We got a very, very favorable response, reaction to that article, which encouraged us.
And what did you learn about affordable housing in writing the book?
I've learned about American history, and in general, I've learned a great deal, and I've learned so much from our different authors. I would like to mention, for the sake of brevity, one of our 18 authors who have supplied texts, Roseanne Haggerty. She writes about the broken system, the fact that the whole system, the whole complicated, incredibly complicated group of people who are involved with making affordable housing happen are not really talking to each other in most cases, and they're grappling with outdated procedures and laws. Zoning is one, for example, and zoning has been discussed at great length in relationship to our mayor's City of Yes project, which is on the table right now. And so long as nobody in the different disciplines communicates with each other, and so long as people are unwilling to be flexible and consider changing some of the outdated rules and regulations that are in place now and that are paralyzing the situation, nothing will happen.
To what extent does this problem exist partly because every different community in the country has different rules and regulations, or are they relatively uniform, just outdated?
Well, originally the federal government did build affordable housing, but due to the federal organization of the United States, each state, as we know, has tremendous authority. So after the government basically gave up building housing, which was capped by the Faircloth Amendment in 1998, which actually capped the number of units that the federal government could build housing. And in fact, if a new unit was built, something had to be withdrawn from the system. So then the states took over, and each state, being different, has a completely different direction and attitude towards housing, a lot of which is affected by NIMBYism, the idea of not in our backyard, and racist zoning and other limitations that prevents needed housing from being built.
There's an underlying resistance to any kind of public housing, affordable housing, it seems, no matter what community that you go to, right? Even if you clear out all the rules and regulations, there's always a contingent of people who really don't want it.
Well, I think it's really from a misunderstanding of what is affordable housing, which can range from the very neediest level to the multiple of the average median income, or AMI. So the higher levels of AMI, which are even a multiple of that, are more workforce housing for teachers, policemen, people who are, integral parts of the community. And yet I think most of the resistance comes from the misinterpretation of the idea of the housing being for, let's say, formerly homeless people, which even for those people it's never been a problem once they're integrated into an actual housing system. And much of the housing, it's not only affordable, it's called supportive housing. It has social services built into the very building itself, so that there are people who can help with job placement, with education, with medical facilities. So once the housing is built, it's very different today than the old projects, which had become centers of crime. And I think that's the difference. It's a lack of education about understanding what affordable housing can be, not only in terms of the people living there, but also the way it looks. And one of the missions of the book was to show that it could actually be very attractive and well-designed, and be an asset to the community rather than a debit. So.
Yeah, and also people have a tendency to complain about drug use and alcoholism, which of course can be a problem, but it has been proven that many people suffering from those disorders developed them because they were homeless. They weren't alcoholics and drug users when they were living in a normal home. They became alcoholics and drug users in connection with their homelessness.
We read about in the newspaper, every major city, it seems, has this issue with affordable housing. I was wondering, in writing the book, did you find any cities that have their act together, that are doing a great job at affordable housing?
Well, Houston, actually, surprisingly, in view of their rather loose zoning or absence of zoning regulations, they did very well. And they did exactly what the author, Roseanne Haggerty, has recommended, which is that they put all of these different groups that are necessary to make this happen together under the umbrella of one nonprofit group who controlled the conversations between everybody and the whole process. And they made a tremendous dent in the homelessness. I think the figure is that they improved homelessness or reduced homelessness by over 60%.
So they were able to successfully build lots of units for people to live in?
Well, I don't know about that. Alex, did they actually build units? They must have to have reduced homelessness.
They have built many units, yes.
When did this happen?
Very recently.
So they're the gold standard, as far as you know, for making homelessness reduction work.
I think they provide a good model, but we also have one contributor who is a rural housing group who are building affordable housing. And they also provide a very, very nice model for others to follow. They build very cheaply and they make tremendous savings in the cost of materials and so forth. And they share what they learn from their experience with other rural groups around the country.
Where is this group?
It's Rural Studio. It's an architecture group based in Alabama. And they've been doing this for over 20 years now, initially by building individual homes for people in rural communities. And now they've expanded it to create models that can be built more than a single family house at a time.
This was Samuel Mockbee, correct?
Yeah, Mockbee and Coker.
And so they are expanding this model beyond their original scope of houses.
Yes. They've done that intentionally so that they could build more than, one house at a time by providing plans that people could copy and trying to expand the program to more than one household at a time.
You mentioned earlier that these projects work better when there's a support system in place, where there's job placement, where there's daycare, where there's education, where there's industry, where there's a grocery store, I would suppose, all the things that make a community work. Mm-hmm. My understanding is that most of these support systems were really outlawed by the federal government and the states on those projects in the 60s, that you couldn't have these support structures in most of the public housing.
Well, it actually goes back to the 1930s. The initial New York City Housing Authority projects had retail incorporated in the buildings, and then the local, it's always the real estate people who are the problem. The local real estate groups around thought that was competing with their stores and rental properties, and so they convinced the New York City government to outlaw anything except residential in the New York City housing projects. So that was the beginning of these projects as isolated from the community and eventually becoming hotbeds of crime, basically. But the idea of supportive housing is not outlawed. They're individual buildings that have these institutional segments as part of the actual project.
So would they have like schools in the projects or places of worship or things like that?
They can, but it's really more social services. Okay. So the job placement, educational, computer, multi-purpose rooms. It can incorporate community services such as a school, but that's not as frequent. But
I think there's a big effort, isn't there, Alex, right now, to incorporate elements that will appeal to the community. For example, there's a project going up right now in the Bronx that will include a hip hop museum.
Yes,
I think there's a tremendous effort to include, and Alex himself has included art and exhibition spaces in some of his affordable housing.
Yeah, we just did Orinquin in the Bronx, which includes a full art gallery and space for artists artist studios as well. And in that case, the idea of art as an outreach to the community and also part of the idea of art as wellness for the residents as well.
Well, that sounds like it's right up Victoria's alley, too.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, I'm a fan of art as much as anybody, but you can't eat the art.
Some bakeries might question that.
You've got to have, the basic stuff like daycare and grocery store and places where people can actually thrive without having to leave their homes to go get these services, right?
Yes. Well, it includes that mainly, but art is an accessory to that, I would say.
So it does include all those basic things then?
Well, not grocery stores, those are rental properties that often many of the neighborhoods always want to have a grocery store, or they want bookstores, but one still has to find those places that will rent the properties because, unfortunately, there's no endless subsidy for free space in these buildings.
Right.
So you still have to find a tenant who will pay something. In the end, that's one of the key issues about building the affordable housing, because as one of the essays shows, John McMillan's, it still costs almost the same to build market rate and affordable housing. So to make up the difference between the two, that's where the idea of low-income tax credits comes in, because there are no direct subsidies from the government anymore, and there's no political will to do that. And these tax subsidies are not the most efficient way, and they often, after 20 years, even expire. It's become very complicated to build housing without some kind of government intervention.
My last question, what is the hopeful beam of light out of your book? What can we hang our hat on that's going to be better in the future?
Well, we asked all of our authors to try and end on an optimistic note. And for example, Professor Organsky, who teaches at Yale and who is a specialist in materials, has done extensive study of new uses of timber and new combinations of natural wood with manufactured or artificial wood. There has been some progress in loosening up the regulations because the legal height for timber buildings has increased. Alex can tell you how much. I don't remember what that figure is. Is it up to 8 stories?
Well, actually, you could build up to 20 stories, but regulations generally are up to 8 to 10.
And so that is certainly one reason, one element of hope for a less expensive construction. There's actually a project in Mexico that was built by computer-generated housing, mainly for the interior walls, but partially for exterior walls, which is a greatly cheaper way of construction.
Well, also, I think one of the most hopeful aspects of the book is the portfolio of projects, which show that despite all the problems, it's still possible to build beautiful, well-designed, affordable housing. And the examples are across the country in Los Angeles, Houston, Miami, Chicago, New York, and they're all, I would say, indistinguishable from market rate housing and show how one can design a very, elevated design housing that is affordable and an integral part of the community. I think that's an essential part of the book that is hopeful.
The book is called Housing the Nation. Victoria and Alex, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Jazz singer Nicole Lvoff was born into a musical family. Her dad studied violin at Juilliard, and her mother is a classically trained pianist. She lives in Santa Barbara with a background in piano and flute. Her debut album was Here's That Rainy Day, and she's got a new album coming out in the fall. Welcome to the show, Nicole.
Hi, thank you so much. Thanks for having me, George.
Now, in addition to being a great jazz singer, which we're going to hear in just a minute, you are a librarian, and we love librarians here on the show because we're all researchers. So tell me about your job as a librarian.
Well, I work at the Goleta Valley Library, and I kind of wear a few different hats, but I do circulation, where we check out books to patrons, and then we check the books in. But I also do some cataloging, so I get to catalog the new children's books that come in.
Cataloging, yeah.
Yeah, so I also get to do some of the children's programming, which is my favorite part of the job.
Now, do people realize that they've got a great jazz singer leading their children's programming at the library?
Some not, well, thank you for that. But some people have no idea what I do. And then some people do come in and they'll say, oh, when are you singing next? And then we'll talk about music for a little bit. But it's kind of like my somewhat of a hidden secret.
Yeah. Hidden in plain sight right there in Goleta, right?
It's like the librarian by day, jazz singer by night, kind of.
That's a movie right there. That is a movie.
No, it's so cliche, but it's true.
In your first album, Here's That Rainy Day, you had a song written in 1937 by Johnny Mercer and Richard Whiting, and it was in the mostly forgettable film Ready, Willing, and Able, but it came back as the love theme for Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart in the 1947 film Dark Passage. But it was old Blue Eyes Frank Sinatra who catapulted this song to fame in the 1956 album Songs for Swingin' Lovers. Here's Nicole with Too Marvelous for Words.
marvelous, too marvelous for words, like glorious, glamorous, and that old standby amorous. It's all too wonderful, I'll never find the words that say enough, tell enough. I mean, they just aren't swell enough. You're much, too much, and just too very, very to ever be in Webster's dictionary. And so I'm borrowing a love song from the birds to tell you that you're marvelous, too marvelous for words. You're just too marvelous for words, like glorious, glamorous, and that old standby amorous. It's all too wonderful, I'll never find the words that say enough, tell enough. I mean, they just aren't swell enough. You're much, too much, and just too very, very to ever be in Webster's dictionary. And so I'm borrowing a love song from the birds to tell you that you're marvelous, tell you that you're marvelous, to tell you that you're marvelous, too marvelous for words. For words.
So what's funny about that song is that's the first song on my album, Here's That Rainy Day. And when I recorded it, and when we mixed it and everything, the recording engineer was telling me, he said, that song is under 3 minutes long. And he said, you can't record a song for under 3 minutes long. I think it's like, I don't know the timing on it, but it's just under 3. It was kind of a joke because it was the first song on the album and it was so short.
Is that a rule somewhere? I didn't know about that rule.
No, he was just teasing me. I think it's just, I don't know, maybe it was just a little uncommon, but I said, no, we're gonna keep it under 3 minutes. So
now, the first thing that our intrepid research team could find about you on the musical scene was a high school singing group called Enchante.
Oh my gosh.
Was that your first big break?
Yes, that was. Let me think about that. Yeah, I was in the Enchante group in high school, and man, I loved that. I was doing that choir. There was like 3 different levels of the singing groups that you could get into, and one was the main choir, which anyone could go. In Enchante, you had to audition for, and that was a little more elite. And then the next one was madrigals, which was the creme de la creme would be in madrigals.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to be in madrigals, but I got to be in Enchante, and I was thrilled to be there.
It would sound like madrigals is doing kind of old stuff, like 1200s, 1300s music, right?
It sounds like it. They did the same stuff Enchante did. It was just a little harder to get into.
And you have expanded over the years. You're doing some more country tunes now?
Yeah, I'm kind of have a few different hats I'm wearing. I have a group that I play with my friend Joe Woodard he's a musician, and he also writes for various music magazines. And we have a group we do on the side. We're actually making an album right now for that, and it's our Lucinda Lane group, which is kind of a country-ish group with his original songs. And then I have another group he and I do together. We just call ourselves Nick and Joe, and we just play like Beatles and Joni Mitchell, and just kind of, we even threw in a Led Zeppelin song the other day.
Let's just shake it up a little bit.
Yeah, why not? But yeah, the country stuff was coming from a little bit of the Lucinda Lane group, and I kind of like it.
The 1959 movie, Black Orpheus, featured a Brazilian love story with a bossa nova soundtrack. It won the Palme d'Or at the 1959 Cannes Film Festival, the 1960 Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film, and the 1960 Golden Globe Award for Best Foreign Film. I've heard the theme song of this for decades. It was a huge hit by saxophonist Paul Desmond. But it wasn't until I found Nicole's album that I discovered that this song has words. Here's Nicole with Black Orpheus.
I'll sing to the sun in the sky. I'll sing till the sun rises high. Carnival time is here, magical time of year. And as the time draws near, dreams lift my heart. I'll sing as I play my guitar. I'll cling to a dream from afar. Will love come my way this carnival day and stay here in my heart? I'll cling to a dream from afar. Will love come my way this carnival day and stay here in my heart? Will true love come my way on this carnival day, or will I be alone with my dreams? Will true love come my way on this with my dream.
Did you know, Nicole, I found out that movie was President Obama's mother's favorite film?
Oh,
What do you know?
yeah, that is so cool. It's such a great movie.
And you just bring those words to life. It just gives a whole new meaning to hearing the tune.
Oh, thanks. I love that song so much. I wish I could put that on my next album. Wish I could just, redo it again. It's just such a beautiful tune.
Now, where do you perform around where you live? If people want to come try and see you in person, where can they find you besides the library?
Besides the library, right now I have a monthly gig I'm doing with Joe, and we play at a restaurant called Roy Restaurant in Santa Barbara, and it's been there for like 30 years. It's one of these places, Santa Barbara, there's a lot of things changing. Like the restaurants are really, there's a lot of turnover with restaurants. And
that's a hard business. It's really hard business.
I know. And it's like, things kind of change. The town is kind of slowly changing a little bit, I guess like everything. But that restaurant is still there. And I used to go there when they had entrees for $10. And now the entrees
What's that old joke about Santa Barbara? That it's being gentrified, that the millionaires are getting pushed out by the billionaires?
Oh, yeah. It's an expensive town to live in.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful, but I grew up here, so this is.
So you've seen it. You've really seen it happen.
I have, yeah. Yeah, I do. But it's a special town. If you're ever this way, you should definitely check it out. We have the ocean and we have the mountains, and the it's always beautiful, even when it's foggy and gray. It doesn't last very long. It's like, 73 degrees right now and sunny.
Oh, yeah.
It's
like 100,000 degrees where I am right now, so I'm very envious.
Oh.
You can learn more about Nicole and hear her new album when it comes out at NicoleLvoff.com. That's NicoleLV as in Victor, O, F as in Frank, Frank.com. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you so much, George. Such a pleasure to meet you and to be on your lovely show. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by June Goldfinger and Jeff Taylor, sponsors of Circle, Square, Triangle, a traveling exhibition on the architecture of Myron Goldfinger, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 21,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4.3 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Shelby Hockenberry and Carrie Cesarino handle guest research. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another Tackling Big Problems edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.